What inspired me to join the Navy in the first place? Well, my dad was in the Illinois National Guard, and he was the top sergeant. Then after he got out, he just hung his uniform in the closet in our bedroom. And I used to open that closet all the time, and I saw his uniform in there with the big star in the middle being the top sergeant. In 1940, my dad was an engineer, also self-educated, by the way. He never finished high school. And he was designing ships in Chicago for the Great Lakes. And his commanding officer said, the Navy needs you designing ships, not going off to war. As I went through school, I ended up doing pretty well in high school. And I determined that I was going to go to college, but I was not going to ask my parents to pay for it. One of the scholarships that I applied for was one of the service academies. And at that point in time, now this was in the mid-50s, at that point in time, the senators of each state had so many appointments to each of the academies. And at that point, it was only the military academy at West Point and the Naval Academy at Annapolis. I applied, and I took this test for the senator head for anybody that wanted to try to get into one of the academies. I took the test, and I did pretty well on it. And I got an alternate appointment to the Naval Academy. But they started telling me, it looks like the guy that got the primary appointment, he's probably not going to take it. So you can pretty much count on being able to go. At the last minute, I was told he's going to take the appointment. Oh boy. So I rapidly took the test for the Naval ROTC, and I did pretty well on it, and I got an NROTC scholarship, which paid for everything for me to go to college. There were 3 schools that I had already applied to and had been admitted, and that was the University of Michigan, Notre Dame, and Georgia Tech. I was going to be an engineer. By the time my application got around to those 3 schools, they were all filled up in their ROTC appointments. So they asked the question, if you don't get your top choices, where would you like to go? And I remember thinking, I've never been out west. I think I would like to go to that funny shaped state up near the Canadian border. And I had to get my geography book out to decide whether it was Idaho or Utah. I couldn't remember. It was Idaho, and so I rapidly looked to see whether Idaho had an NROTC unit, and they did. Mm-hmm. So I got an appointment to go to Idaho. Now, the summer before school started in the fall, my parents said, well, why don't we take a trip out to Idaho and take a look and see if this is what you really want to do. I said, because I had an appointment also to go to the General Motors Institute. Everything paid. And
you were a pretty smart guy.
I was back then. She's shaking her head.
Hey, he found you. It had to be really smart.
So we went out there, and I told my mother and dad, I said, you can go back home now. This is where I'm going to school. I just loved it. Just loved Idaho. After my first year, at that point in time, you would take a cruise for 2 months aboard a ship. And the first ship I went aboard was the USS Boston. It was our Navy's first guided missile cruiser. And we sailed out of Norfolk. We went down through the Panama Canal, down the west coast of South America, and went to port in Valparaiso, Chile, country of Chile. On the way down, I became what's called a shellback. When you go across the equator, you become a shellback, and it's a rite of initiation. All the guys that are shellbacks, they put you through the same kind of initiation. And I'll never forget having to kiss the belly button of King Neptune. I was on an ammunition ship, and we had been at sea for almost a month. And for the last week and a half, we had cloudy skies. And so the navigator wasn't able to do his sun shots and his star shots at night so that we knew where we were. It was all by celestial navigation. That we didn't have GPS at that time. I was the officer of the deck. I came on watch at 0400, and the navigator had night orders that said, you should be picking up Guam on the radar at about 0500. We were trying to find Guam because there's an ammunition depot there. And we, as I say, we were out to sea for a long time, and we were rearming a lot of ships. And so we had to refill our coffers, so to speak, with ammunition. Well, 0500 came around, and no Guam. I let it go until about 0530, and still no Guam. And so I sent the messenger down to get the navigator up. He got up, took a look at things. He couldn't figure out what was going on. So he sent down and got the captain up. And the two of them powwowed and decided we had to head due west. So I gave the order, and we went due west. And in a couple hours, we came upon Guam. What had happened, not being able to get a fix as to where we actually were on this planet, we had been offset by uncharted sea currents. They're all over the place. And these sea currents, you generally adjust for them when you get your fixes every day at noon, and when you get your fixes at night. But we had the dead reckoning, or DR, for that entire time for a week and a half. And so that's one of my most unforgettable moments.
What kind of tools did they use to fix where you were at, your position?
Well, you would use a sextant. You get a sight on the sun or you get a sight on a star. You bring it down to the horizon, and then you have books that you go into and you get a reading, and it gives you a line to draw on a chart. And then you pick another star, you draw another line, and then you pick another star and you draw another line. And where they all intersect is where you are on the chart. It's very exacting. It's a very exact way
Very
to know
complicated.
how to do it.
Yeah.
It's very complicated. Were there any moments that I was generally afraid? Well, there's one that I can think of. I wasn't necessarily afraid, but I was nervous. One of the jobs that I had aboard ship was that of damage control officer. And damage control officer, you were in charge of whenever a fire occurred, whenever any damage was done to the hull. You were in charge of getting fires put out and damages contained so the ship did not sink. And I'd gone to special schools to learn how to do that. One thing I'll tell you later on, the Navy knows how to train you very well. So when we would get alongside these ships, and sometimes they would be alongside of us for an hour. Sometimes it would be 4 or 5 hours. And these two ships would just be sailing side by side like this. And if we were going to be alongside, say, a carrier, which is what it would take to get them loaded up again, 4 or 5 hours, they would send me over to the carrier to run some damage control drills for that ship, and then I would give them grades on how well they did. Well, and so the way I get transferred from our ship, the ammunition ship, to the destroyer over there or the aircraft carrier would be by what's called highlining. I would get in a little chair, like that little one in there, and they would buckle me in. And they'd have a high line that would run from our ship to the aircraft carrier on the hangar deck. And they would send me across in that little chair over to the aircraft carrier. And there'd be a line. Nothing was mechanized. It was all a bunch of about 5 or 7 men would be on a line aboard our ship, and the same thing aboard the other ship. And they would feed me over to the other ship. I would get off, spend a couple hours over there, then they would bring me back. This one time, it was pretty rough out. It was very rough, matter of fact. And our two ships were side by side, and when it gets that rough, they stretch it out a bit. You get a little bit further apart, just in case. it can get pretty rough out in the middle of the ocean when the water gets kicked up. Well, I was being transferred from our ship to this ship over here. It was an aircraft carrier in this case. And the ships came close together like that, and all of it, and they tipped in, and all of a sudden both lines went slack, and I went under the water, and then the lines got tight again, and boom! Our son, who was in the Navy, said they would never do it that way today, Dad. Today they do that by helicopter. And I said, yeah, but back then we didn't do it that way. We didn't have helicopter pads on all of our ships. So that was probably the closest I came to. I wasn't afraid, but I was nervous when I went down.